Hello and welcome to the Poultry Network podcast. I'm Tom Woolman.
And I'm Tom Willings.
How are you?
Tom, what are we talking about?
Well, we've got a subject today that is going to have the nutritionists listening jumping up and down and reaching for their headphones and probably then settling down somewhere quiet where they can enjoy this. So
go and get a cup of tea. Yeah, for those 4 nutritionists listening to this, you thought that this podcast was not for you. Well, think again.
Yeah, so we've got Aaron Cowieson on this week, who works for DSM Animal Nutrition, which is it's going to be an interesting delve into the world of broiler nutrition, and specifically to do with blood biomarkers. Yes, there you go. You've got your warning. Press play and go and make yourself a cup of tea. Those nutritionists listening. Yeah, but let's get into the interview.
Looking for a cost-effective way to put your business in front of the UK's poultry sector? The Poultry Network Directory gives suppliers a direct and highly targeted route to poultry producers across the country. The directory is posted directly to 2,000 UK poultry farms, putting your company, products and contact details into the hands of the people who matter. Your listing will also remain live on Poultry Network for 12 months, providing valuable year-round online visibility. An enhanced listing costs just £695 plus VAT. Based on the print distribution alone, that works out at less than 35 pence per farm, before you even account for 12 months of exposure on the Poultry Network website. Positions are limited, so secure your place before the best opportunities are booked or taken by a competitor. Booking is quick and straightforward. For more information, visit the Poultry Network website or contact Jake at dmediagroup.com.
I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome Aaron Cowieson to the podcast. Welcome, Aaron.
Thank you, Tom. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. Looking forward to the chat.
Great. I've got your job title down here, Aaron, as a senior science fellow, which sounds quite highfalutin. Could you tell me what it involves, and what your job covers?
Yeah, it's essentially I have a kind of a scientific overseeing responsibility for the animal nutrition and health business within DSM-Firmenich. So I cover lots of different innovation topics, from gut health and nutrition and microbiome and precision services, which I think we'll touch on a little bit as we go through this conversation. And I keep an eye on our academic network too, professors and PhD students and so on, engaged with customers, looking at different technical problems that the industry faces in welfare, sustainability, nutrient health optimization, and so on. So, and I've been 13 years now with DSM, so a reasonable
and a wide
stint.
brief. Yeah.
Do you do a lot of travelling?
Yeah, I actually live in Ork. I'm speaking to you today from the Orkney Islands, which is where my home is, right in the north of Scotland. Most people have never heard of it, but you're both in the UK, so I guess you can set the context a little bit. And I do travel, probably 40% of my time traveling. So
and the other 60%,
Edinburgh Airport a lot.
Yeah. Wait. When you're not traveling, are you sort of bird watching and keeping an eye on the sea state? Must be spectacular up there.
Yeah, and sheltering from the wind.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah. Well, that's Tom and I probably wouldn't get on very well up there with our toupees would soon blow off, wouldn't they, Tom?
That's right. My flesh colour hair will be gone.
So, Aaron, you were talking about innovation, and that was one of the things we were going to talk to you about today, and about what's going on now in terms of blood biomarkers being able to show us what's going on with birds and specifically broiler birds when it comes to the mineral analysis. So if we think about this, people have historically formulated what birds need by formulating a diet, haven't they, and putting certain levels of nutrients and minerals in the diet, and then hoping and estimating that this will translate into what the bird needs. But what you've managed to do is to go a little bit of a step further than this, haven't you, and add another layer of precision onto it. And just wondered if you could start off by telling us a little bit about it.
Yeah, I think this has really come from the ongoing technological advancement in portable, let's call them portable analytical devices, because in the past, the kind of monitoring the kind of biomarkers that you just mentioned, it would have happened within a university setting, but typically not in a commercial farm. But now we have portable devices which can actually be used on farm, and they're very rapid. So you can generate from various different biological samples an analytical composition very cheaply and very, very quickly. And so it's kind of opened up a whole new area for on-farm diagnostics, precision nutrition, prediction, and so on. So we've been involved in this probably for around the last 5 or 6 years. We've been working with customers in all of our different markets, different genetics, different production systems, different climates, and so on, different nutritional programs. And we're monitoring blood biomarkers to try and identify how the birds are perceiving the diet that they get and the environment that they're grown in. And as you say, historically diets were formulated and with best assumptions on the nutrient mix in the diet. And in some cases that oversupplies nutrients, in some cases it undersupplies nutrients. And it's very complex. And now we have these devices, we can actually measure really exactly what's going on in the bird. So it gives nutritionists and veterinarians more high resolution feedback from the flocks to help them course correct and calibrate the choices that they make.
And we're talking here, I think we're specifically focusing on calcium and phosphorus as two important minerals that are needed. But can you tell me a little bit about their physiological function and why they're important to the bird?
I think they're important for all animals, including for humans, of course. And we're all familiar with osteoporosis and things that happen later in life. But in avian species in general, calcium is particularly important. They're an egg-laying species. They have an evolutionary adaptation for calcium sensing. They have a very profound appetite for calcium. And blood calcium and phosphorus are very tightly regulated for those reasons. But what surprised me is how variable they can be. We know that we need to supply calcium and phosphorus for things like skeletal development, to avoid any problems with mobility and lameness. But phosphorus is also, for example, a very important driver of appetite. And if you undersupply phosphorus, feed intake goes down very quickly, and then your productivity can suffer. So calcium and phosphorus, very important for skeletal function, but also for a whole range of other things: energy metabolism, immune function, feed intake regulation, and so on. So really quite critical.
Why is it that potentially a nutritionist could formulate a diet which is well balanced, feed it to a chicken, and yet when we actually look at that chicken and you take some samples of blood, you actually find that the calcium and the phosphorus might not actually be at the levels that they should be? Why does that happen?
Well, that can be either nutrition or health related. But on the nutrition side, one of the formulation constraints that we have at the moment in the industry is that nutritionists typically formulate their diets on a total calcium basis, not a digestible calcium basis. So they're already making some assumptions about how much of the calcium they feed is actually digestible. And that can be quite variable, and it can depend on the health of the intestinal tract. It can depend on things like your limestone, porosity, solubility of your limestone, other calcium sources in the diet, even things like the drinking water. If it's a very hard drinking water area, I think I was talking with Tom earlier, and he was saying that he's in Wiltshire, and Wiltshire, it's a very hard water area. There's quite a large concentrations of calcium carbonate in the drinking water, relatively alkaline drinking water. So even if a nutritionist has really dialed in the calcium and phosphorus levels on the feed ingredients, there's quite a number of other factors that can throw off the actual digestible calcium supply to the bird, and that's what we're detecting when we measure the blood biomarkers.
I ask a question about the practical detection process. You described them as portable devices, and I think you said they were sort of, relatively cheap and quite quick to deploy. Um, who is using this equipment? Is it a nutritionist that's coming to farm? Is it a farmer? Is it a vet? Who's actually deploying the tech? And do you ever see a time where it's actually the farmer that we've completely kind of democratized the analysis and individuals managing birds are doing this on a regular basis to adjust the nutrition?
Yeah, and I think that's the ideal scenario. At the moment, the vast majority of these devices are being used in the small animal medicine, veterinary clinics for dogs and cats and so on, for clinical diagnostics. And I think we are the first to really roll these out for commercial livestock. And we're talking about broilers today, but we also work in laying hens, breeders, and we're also working in swine, different growth stages of pigs. And at the moment, it's mostly the devices are being used by trained veterinarians, nutritionists, supported by our team from DSM. But we do have some customers who've actually made the decision to purchase their own devices, and they use them independently, leveraging our platform, so our iPad interface, our web environment, our data ecosystem, but doing the actual blood analysis and things themselves. And that gives them more agility, and they can use the devices as they see fit.
And what sort of symptoms would farmers be looking out for then if their birds did have an imbalance of calcium or phosphorus, for example? What would they see in their birds and on their farm?
It's quite variable, but things, typically we see body weight uniformity in the flock beginning to become become higher, an increase in water to feed intake ratio, maybe wet litter, foot pad dermatitis, some evidence of lameness or other skeletal related abnormalities like femoral head necrosis, which veterinarians routinely detect. High feed conversion ratio, spike in mortality, behavioral abnormalities. We've had some customers with sort of fairly severe hypocalcemia, so the blood calcium that was too low. And in some cases, birds can become almost paralyzed. You have this tremoring, muscle tremors and things. So it can be quite severe, leading to mortality, of course, at the end. But a range of kind of macroscopic symptoms that are pretty easy to see.
That's quite a long list, Aaron. Do you see this as being, the last couple of percent, the cherry on top of the icing on top of the cake, or is this almost a tool to improve the fundamentals, such that we might see, quite a step forward, a big step change in terms of overall compound results on farm?
I think that in some cases it's maybe fine tuning, and it might be a tool where if a nutritionist is considering using a new formulation matrix, or there's an alternative raw material that's being evaluated. Some nutritionists are moving from, as I mentioned earlier, formulating on a total calcium basis, moving to digestible calcium. When you do those sorts of things, there's a certain risk involved, and a tool like this can bring that connection and the agility that you need to make those kind of fine course corrections. But in many cases, the effects are really quite profound. You can have differences between flocks of 10, 15, 20 points of feed conversion, massive economic costs associated with this kind of heterogeneity in flock performance, without really understanding what's going on and monitoring biomarkers such as calcium and phosphorus, as well as others related to immunity and health and so on. It can make quite significant differences, and we have a lot of examples where customers have seen those kind of responses.
Is there a massive amount of data in the background on these test results that, with the application of modern science and data science, machine learning, AI, etc., correlations in other either environmental aspects or performance health outcomes can be investigated? And if so, are you already doing that? And if so, what are you seeing?
Yeah, no, that's important, and I think that was one of the reasons why these devices haven't been used historically is because we didn't have reliable reference ranges. So we didn't know what a 30-day-old Ross 308 broiler chicken, what the calcium or the phosphorus level in the blood should be. And you really need to know what the optimal levels are in order to detect if it's too high or it's too low. So we have a very, very large database, tens of thousands of farms of commercial birds. I mentioned broilers, also layers and breeders, where we've really dialed in for the different genetics and production systems and the age and the gender of the bird, exactly what the optimal ranges should be, and what the symptoms are if there's any derangement in the blood levels, either too high or too low. And in addition to that, we've run quite a large number of randomized controlled trials with university professors where, for example, we've deliberately fed birds a low calcium diet. And then we've looked at the blood biomarker responses to that low calcium diet and then corrected the low calcium diet for a more optimized diet. And you can see in many cases within hours, you see the blood biomarkers coming back up to the normal levels. And we've published a lot of those papers in Poultry Science and some of the other kind of trade press and so on.
And is this something that's going to be of use to individual farms and individual farmers to make use of? Because it almost sounds like something that you could use to evaluate a wider set of farms, that are all on the same diet. How agile can you be? Because I suppose it's great being able to see what the calcium and phosphorus levels are in your birds at any one time, but I'm not exactly sure what you could do about it potentially at that time. But how do you see it playing out in practice?
Yeah, that's an important point, and so if your intervention is via the feed, it typically takes at least 2 or 3 weeks for that feed to reach the farm. So if we detect an anomaly, let's say your birds have low calcium, and the nutritionist decides we need to increase the calcium in the diet via the feed, it's probably not going to be that flock that is benefiting, because they will probably have gone to processing before the new feed comes through. So there's a bit of a retroactive strategy here where you're evaluating a number of flocks, a number of cycles, and you're fine-tuning your diet approaches as you go and optimizing gradually. But we have had 1 or 2 examples where a drinking water solution was available. So we had one customer in the US where we detected low blood phosphorus in young chicks from a young breeder flock. So there was some farms that had really low blood phosphorus, and there is a water-soluble phosphorus source that can be added to the drinking water to correct within the first few days of life the low phosphorus. So it can be quite real time, if you like, but if there's a feed change required, then of course there is a bit of latency.
The other thing that I know quite often comes up, particularly when I'm traveling around farm, and if people are seeing issues potentially with leg health early on, is vitamin D3, which has got an important part to play, hasn't it, in terms of birds actually being able to utilise the nutrients that are available. Do you just want to talk a little bit about that and where vitamin D3 sits?
Yeah, that's also very important. And if we see hypocalcemia, if we see this kind of clinical low blood calcium, there's 2 things that we normally look for. One is nutrition. So we have a conversation, we do some drinking water analysis, we talk with the nutritionist, we do some limestone profiling to make sure that the bioavailable calcium in the limestone and the per se calcium content of the limestone is as expected. And we would also, of course, look at the premix and look at the vitamin D in the premix. But there is also a health component. So because calcium can be low in blood, partly because it's being not supplied or it's not bioavailable in the diet, but it can also be because, for example, the kidney health is compromised, and the kidney is responsible for activating vitamin D3 into 1,25-hydroxy D3, which is the active hormonal vitamin D form. So there's a little bit more to it than just saying your blood calcium is low, therefore you need to add more to the feed. And the biomarker suite that we have, which includes almost 30 different blood biomarkers, allows us to detect is, if the kidneys are healthy, the liver's healthy, there's no reason to think that the activation of vitamin D through to the active hormonal form is compromised in any way. Then we would probably gravitate more toward nutrition and water quality and the premix composition and so on. So there's a little bit of a kind of a differential diagnosis that goes on, kind of logical steps that we would collaborate with the customer on to try and get to the bottom of what's happening.
So what would you think would be the sort of the practical takeaway then for people that are listening to this, whether they could be nutritionists or vets or could be farmers? What do people need to take away from this conversation?
I think what I'm seeing is on the arable side of our business, not our business DSM, but the agricultural community, on the arable side, I don't know if you're watching Clarkson's Farm. Many people are. I love it. I think it's a great show. But
it gets a mention pretty much every episode, Aaron. You're on you're safe ground. Yeah.
Yeah, but you see the adoption of these drones and automated robotics and so on and sensors and satellites and things, and they're probably 10 years ahead of the animal side of agriculture. And so what I see as this kind of technology is in a sense we're catching up with our arable cousins using these kind of more portable, more automated kind of devices to give us information that we have never had access to before. So we're moving into more genuine precision nutrition, welfare, sustainability, health monitoring. And it's not only about having the devices available for measuring these things, it's also about having the data ecosystem behind that you can interpret, you can visualize. And that's where your generative AI, large language models and machine learning and things come into play. And I think what I'm seeing is the takeaway, if you like, from this is that we have access now to technologies that we haven't had access to even 5 or 10 years ago. But they're also more accessible because the data ecosystem is much, much more democratized than it was even 5 years ago. So it's an exciting time, and I think we hopefully will not only catch up with our arable friends, but we might even overtake them one day. We do generate a lot of data in animal production, and it's tantalizing how much value there is ingrained in it.
Yeah. You are pushing on an open door, and we recorded recently with a couple of young guys in the poultry industry, one each from the broiler and laying sector, and the wrap up was all about data. We were looking forward 10 years, what's coming down the track, equipment, house design, genetics, etc. Okay, let's wrap up. What's the most important thing? Both data and our ability to harness it and embrace it and interpret it and apply it. And what you're describing, I know you said from a broiler point of view, you might be looking at today's crop but making an intervention for tomorrow's. But for breeders, for layers, you could envisage making decisions that really are going to pay dividends in that same flock, in that same crop. And exciting times ahead.
Great.
So,
well, it's been brilliant to chat to you, Aaron, and your internet has been fantastic. And funnily enough, an awful lot better than some people's internet on the mainland that we've interviewed. So, however
fantastic advert for Orkney.
However much you're paying for your broadband, please keep on paying it. It's worth every penny.
Oh, that's great. And it's actually sunny here today. It's amazing. It's
all right. Don't gloat.
Well, it was a pleasure to meet you both, Tom and Tom. So hopefully we'll meet in person at some stage, maybe at a pig and poultry fair or some other event, maybe in the UK or elsewhere. But thank you for inviting me onto the podcast. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you for joining us. An absolute pleasure. Fascinating topic.
Yes,
I think we say that probably when we finished a conversation with many of our guests. But the thing that struck me, I should say, the thing that struck me beyond you managing to link a toupee with blood biomarkers, because that boggles my mind. I don't know how you've managed to achieve that link. But yeah, the thing that strikes me is just how many sources of data we are piling up. It's as though we are recreating like our own poultry, and for poultry insert agriculture, and I'm sure many other walks of professional life, personal life as well. But we're building the World Wide Web all over again. We've had 20 years of gathering information, pen and paper, and then Excel, and then maybe some apps for bits and bobs of data, and then we've stumbled across AI and machine learning, and we're starting to see how we can harness that to interpret what we've got. But at the same time, the quality of the information, the breadth of the information that we are starting to have access to is growing at an equally impressive rate. I think it's an incredibly exciting time that we are living through.
Because we were talking about broiler production here, but I'm thinking if you had a laying flock and people now are having their laying flocks going on for much longer than they would have been historically, well, what separates out a good laying flock from an average to a poor one? Well, if you've got the ability to micromanage that nutrient balance of your flock as it goes on, and you can see what's actually going on with the bird and with its nutrient levels, and you can put a little bit more in or a little bit less in, that could have a huge impact over the period of 100 weeks or more.
Exactly. If you've got these diagnosis tools that are in the hands of the people that are managing birds, or perhaps it's in the hands of the people that are managing multiple flocks of birds across many businesses, but you've got almost real-time analytics of, we were talking calcium and phosphorus in this conversation, but you think, well, why could that not apply to various other biomarkers in blood or in the water or whatever it might be? You've got at the touch of a button the ability to identify and then to intervene to optimize, to improve efficiency, of course improve health linked to welfare, well-being of the animal. And it's
how far away do you think we are from wearable tech for chickens? Garmin watches or Google glasses potentially?
Is that a serious question?
Well, it's partly not a serious question, but in terms of real life monitoring, you think about these devices and how useful they are for human health now, and monitoring all sorts of things that are going on with you.
Wearable tech, no. Although you would imagine for cattle, for example, probably there now anyway.
They do, yeah.
So, but for immediate on-site diagnosis of exactly what's wrong with either mortality, birds that have died, okay, what's the PM say? Well, it's not just open up and have a look, it's testing. But for kind of routine spot checks of bird health of live animals, moments away is what it feels like. Yeah, exciting times.
Excellent. All right. Well, I'll see you next week then, Tom. Look after yourself.
Same to you. All the best. Cheerio. And thanks for listening, everybody. We should say like and subscribe. They say that in every episode, but
we don't say it very often, do we? Yeah. Anyone that is listening and suddenly thinks, I haven't subscribed. If you subscribe, it makes your life a lot easier, and we just pop up every Friday with a new episode. Hopefully,
it means that we get to do this for a little bit longer. Keeps the editor happy. Yeah.
All right. Bye for now.